Greetings and welcome back to another episode of Off the Cuff, the unscripted show where I will be talking about movies, TV shows, or anything entertainment related that's on my mind. And for today's episode, I wanted to talk about the recent entry in the action series, John Wick 3. It might not be the best action movie, and I think it's debatable as to whether or not this was as good as John Wick 2. But I'd probably put it at about the same level. But it's another wonderful entry into this series. And it actually feels a little bit different than the prior films. You know, the first two entries were mainly shootouts, a little bit of hand-to-hand fighting. But that was about it. Nothing too crazy, just a lot of shooting and a lot of bodies. Now, this one actually had a number of unique fights. It almost felt like every fight, just about every fight, had its own unique spin or qualifier on it. You know, you had one that involved horses, one on motorcycles, one versus a really giant dude, one versus guys wearing body armor, another involving dogs, and so on. It just, every fight felt unique, using these various extra things to really set itself apart from the other action set pieces and shootouts within not only this film, but the films that came prior. And even though I think some of the CGI was a little bit wonky with some of that extra stuff they were trying to do, particularly with the horse fight, I still think it worked really well and was a hell of a lot of fun. Now, one of the biggest problems with that is some of the bigger different qualifiers from the first half of the film really make the last half of the film with its action set pieces feel a little bit more underwhelming. It's not terrible, certainly, but you go from all these fights where one where he's pretty much just throwing knives at people and they're throwing them at him, and he uses horses to kick people to death and all this other stuff. And then you go to the end and, he's shooting people with body armor. It's a unique spin on the shootout because he had to get up and close and shoot through the weak points of the armor. But it wasn't quite as cinematically awesome as all that stuff that came before. More so than the prior films, this also gives an added focus on some of these extra side characters, whether they're supporting John Wick or against him. Halle Berry's Sophia was just badass. And honestly, I said this to my wife after, I think she deserves her own film. I mean, she was awesome with her two attack dogs. That was a great sequence. And Halle Berry really kicked some ass. And I would love to see her get her own starring film within this world of John Wick. The top villains in this one were definitely given a bit more time to shine than perhaps in the prior films. Common had some decent characterization and a couple of awesome clashes in the second film. But in this one, Mark Dacascos has a fair amount of screen time, and I think he did a great job as the sort of overarching antagonist that John Wick has to face off against. And then we also should not forget about the two Indonesian martial artists, Yayan Ruhian and Cecep Rahman, who are both from the Raid films. Yayan was in the first and second, playing different characters, and then Cecep was in the second one, and they're both amazingly talented martial artists. And if you want to see them in their best, then definitely watch the Raid films. But they still did an awesome job in this, and it was really cool to see them here, especially getting more exposure outside of just the Indonesian film industry. Now, as far as the story goes, there was some interesting world building, as they always seem to do in each film, giving us a little bit more and a little bit more to kind of flesh out this assassin world that they all live in. And we were also given some actual backstory for John Wick. Now, I think the world building was a bit convoluted sometimes. It's getting a little kind of lofty with all of these different characters that are out in this world and what their roles are within the assassination industry. But I think the backstory for John Wick was pretty cool to see. It wasn't in depth, it wasn't overly lengthy, just these little bits here and there through conversations he had with Angelica Houston gave us a little bit more insight into where John Wick came from and why he is who he is. Now, overall, this is another awesome and fun entry into this series that is unabashedly violent and brutal. If you're a fan of action films, you should definitely check it out. And you also probably want to keep an eye out for the fourth one coming out in a couple of years. Well, that'll do it for this episode. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and visit HappyDragonPictures.com to stay up to date with all of our releases. And also, keep in mind that this series going forward is mostly going to be a Patreon exclusive. So, be sure to check us out on there as well. Well, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.